My name's Eugene Worley, and along with my wife Glenda, we have spent nearly 50 years in ministry in Ethiopia, Norway, the UK, and in the US. I'd like in these podcasts to share with you some of our experiences from those years. Blessings and challenges. Though God had given us a great open door, there were certainly many challenges both in our personal lives and in the ministry. The Apostle Paul stated it very well. For a great door and effectual is open unto me, and there are many adversaries. Health, cultural adjustments, and bureaucracy were only some of the challenges that missionaries faced in those early years. I would like to begin by looking at that period of time we were in language school in Addis Ababa. The language program was set up so that a person could start in either August or January. We started in January and finished the following January. During this time, we were overseeing the deaf school and the church while the Vicks were in the States for a short furlough. An extra responsibility I had was being a contact person for the construction of the deaf school. Mr. Khalil, an Egyptian contractor, was over the actual construction, but he often met with the red tape of local bureaucracy. This obviously delayed the construction of the building and often required that I contact Mr. Vick in the States. Needless to say, we had our plates full. Prior to the Vicks leaving, we gave them a farewell party at the restaurant of an Ethiopian hotel. We'd invited a lot of missionaries and other friends for the occasion. It was the custom that the hostess would give an extra portion of injera bawat, or the bread and the stew, to one person in the party. As it turned out, I was the person who booked the party, so she came to me with the injera bawat in her hand, which was also the custom. She placed it in my mouth, which I was supposed to eat without biting her fingers. Unfortunately, I wasn't practiced in the skill of someone feeding me. Everyone got a laugh out of that, except that poor hostess. One of the challenges we faced during our years in Addis was Glenda's health. She alternated between strep throat and kidney infection. This made those first 2 years very hard on her. In addition to that, she had a couple of accidents. The first one happened while at home when she went to answer the phone. She slipped and fell, and while attempting to break her fall, she grabbed a straight-back chair. Instead of breaking her fall, her hand slipped over the back of the chair, causing a bad bruise that developed into a severe hematoma, which eventually became infected. This required a visit to the hospital where they lanced the hematoma and allowed the fluid to drain. Needless to say, this was very painful, but especially considering the medical facilities of that day. Eventually it did heal, but she bears the mark of that accident to this day. The second accident occurred while we were temporarily using the new deaf school as a place to stay before we moved to Dessie, a city up north. While the facilities were adequate, the door had a glass pane which had not been sealed. Glenda went to open the door, and the glass broke and cut her wrist. We had a very interesting experience at the only foreign hospital in Addis, as the light in the room where they were sewing up her wrist was broken. Throughout that procedure, Richard Vick was working on the lamp. She also bears the marks of that accident. On another occasion, Ron got very sick with the croup. This happened on a trip to Nairobi, Kenya. The Vicks were returning from the States, and we thought it would make a nice vacation to meet them in Nairobi. While there, we visited the Nairobi National Game Park to see the wild animals. We'd rented a Volkswagen van and drove to a place near the river where you could walk down to see the crocodiles. The van was loaded with the Vick family and our family of 3. The ladies decided that they didn't want to go with us, so they stayed with the younger children in the van. We had bought some fruit to eat along with some other snacks, which was in the back with the ladies and the kids. Without thinking, we had left the front door open, and a baboon jumped into the front of the van. He crawled over the front seat into the back to get the fruit. The ladies were in full panic mode. They couldn't do anything but watch the baboon grab the fruit and crawl back into the front and grab my camera, which was laying on the seat, and then jumping out of the van. Fortunately, the baboon didn't go very far away, but stopped and ate the bananas. We returned from the river to find some very scared ladies, and I was able to retrieve my camera. It was on this occasion that Ron became very sick with the croup. The place where we were staying was able to get a doctor who gave him some medicine and said that we should get some steam that would open up his airways. We did that by putting him in a crib, using a kettle for the steam, and also making a tent to cover him. After some time, he was able to sleep, but it was a very scary time watching him struggling to breathe. After we returned from Nairobi, he continued to have problems with the croup. In fact, one night he woke us up and told us that there were bears in his closet. We realized he had a high fever and took him to the hospital. There was another unsettling element in those early years: student protest and the government's attempt to maintain order. Here's what I wrote for a news publication in 1969. For 3 weeks now, the citizens of Addis Ababa have been aware that things are not normal. The presence of troops with helmets and carbine rifles causes one to be a bit jumpy, especially as you drive through the heart of the city and see them walking in threes. Added to all of this was the fact that the first week was filled with rumors that the students were going to riot. Though the revolution didn't occur until after we left the country, it was still a time of much unrest. On one of those occasions, the Vicks encouraged us to go over and stay with them since they were in a safer part of the city. We had a break-in into one of the storage rooms where we kept some of our clothes. Fortunately, the police were able to locate the clothes and return them to us. But this only added to our own unsettledness as relatively new missionaries. So it didn't take much encouragement for us to accept the Vicks' offer to stay with them a few days. There were a couple of different ways we could go to their house, but without realizing it, we chose the least safe route. We went through the market area of the city. We passed through the area without incident, but the Vicks told us that it was a very unsafe area. In spite of that, it was a very productive year. Though we had all the extracurricular things going on, we were definitely focused on learning the Amharic language. This was the official Ethiopian language, and the alphabet consisted of 33 basic characters, though each letter had 7 different forms. This came to 231 characters you had to learn. It takes 6 weeks of intensive study to learn the alphabet and your greetings. The greetings were complicated by having to understand the time of the day, the gender of the person you're greeting, and by their status, either an older person or someone in authority. So it's not easy learning all of the different forms of greetings, though it did help that we were involved in ministry and were interacting with Ethiopians on a regular basis. I remember someone commented to a medical doctor from the U.S. about his southern drawl, His response was that the Ethiopians knew that he loved them, and that was more important than speaking the language perfectly. We continued our ministry with both the hearing and the deaf. The work on the new deaf school was progressing slowly. What we did learn during those early years in Ethiopia was that God uses vessels of clay. We were imperfect, often unpolished, and sometimes cracked, but we were instrument in God's hands, and He was working on us as well as the people that we were working with. The blessing of knowing you're in God's will, doing God's work, always outweighs any of the challenges we face. Thank you for listening. I look forward in the coming podcast sharing with you some more stories of our move to Dessie and also my meeting with the Crown Prince. If you want to continue hearing these stories, you can search for To the Regions Beyond podcast and subscribe in your podcast player. You can also find To the Regions Beyond on YouTube and subscribe there.